Welcome to Seeking the Lost with Earl Barnett. This program is sponsored by some area churches of Christ and is dedicated to spreading the everlasting gospel as revealed in the Holy Scriptures. The churches of Christ accept the Scriptures as totally inspired of God and the all-sufficient guide for faith and practice. Therefore, they reject all doctrines of men and rely totally on the Bible to direct their course in serving God. It is our pledge to you that each lesson will be the truth as revealed in His holy word. Mr. Barnett carefully prepares the graphics so you can clearly see the book, chapter, and verse of each lesson taught. We urge you to either copy the scriptures used or record this program for further study. If you have any questions or comments, or if you need prayer, the Seeking the Lost ministry can be reached toll-free at 1-800-390-7734. It is our prayer that Seeking the Lost will be an important source of information about God's Word and will help you more perfectly worship Him. And now, here is Mr. Barnett.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to the Seeking the Lost broadcast. Excuse me. I want to study with you today just a simple lesson, one that I don't know if I've ever really taught in full, and that is simply the beginning. What are we talking about? We're talking about the beginning. In the beginning, what did God do? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Quite a feat, don't you think? We're going to study something about that as we go along. But in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I've heard someone say that the world, the universe, is made up of energy, and it's made up of space, and it's made up of mass, and it's made up of time. In the beginning, God, the force behind it all, created the energy and the heavens, the space, and the earth. And I don't know if that is a reasonable assumption, but it sounds good, doesn't it? That in the very first verse of the Bible, that God took care of those things that make up the universe. There's a lot of misinformation given out about the beginning. And I want us to study that and just see if we can make sense. The earth was without form. No form to it. It was void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Do you know this, that we are reading an eyewitness account of the beginning? No human being was an eyewitness, but we know that the Holy Spirit, that the Trinity, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, that they were witnesses of the beginning. And that's what we're dealing with here. The scriptures continue. The Lord said, "Let there be light," and there was light. I think it's important for us to deviate here just a little bit and think about what light means to life on this planet. You know, a tree cannot get out and run its food down. It has to make its food right there. We've given a name to it, and it's called photosynthesis. That is light combining. By the use of light, all plants are able to make their food standing still. Now, we of the animal kingdom are not privileged to do that, are we? But at the same time, I've often thought that if mankind was writing the beginning story, this is one place that he was definitely messed up. Why? Well, because he said that he created light. And light is necessary for life on this planet. Without light, it can't exist. And so the first thing he did was to create light. You know something about light that many people don't know, that it can be measured in light waves or light particles, photons. It's really phenomenal about light that it can be measured in both ways. Now then, and God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And so the evening and the morning were the first day. And so right out of the box, God creates something that is totally necessary for this world to exist. And that was light. The speed of light is phenomenal. It's difficult to understand that anything that can travel 186,000 miles per second. That means that if I could count 1001, which is approximately a second, that light, if it were harnessed, would circle the earth at the equator 7.5 times. Now, that's naturally trucking, isn't it? And so light has peculiar possibilities. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. You know, when I first started reading the scriptures, I thought firmament, that's something firm. Well, it isn't actually. This is the canopy of the sky. This is the difference between the water that's in the heavens in the form of clouds and what's on earth in the form of rivers and oceans. He said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And so we have this firmament. We have this enclosure. We have this horizon, if you please. And it divides the water from the waters. When I was in school, we talked about, or we read in our textbook, how many million tons of water that is drawn out of the ocean each day, and of course forming clouds, and they drift back over the land and provide rain. How many million tons of water is evaporated from the oceans, dividing the waters from the waters? And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. What an almighty being that we're dealing with here, that he's able to speak these things into being. And God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. Somebody says, preacher, is that 24-hour day? Well, we'll have to get to that in a moment. I know for a long time a person would be guilty of heresy if he suggested anything other than a 24-hour day that we're dealing with here. We're going to see about that. I don't like to be controversial, but at the same time, God gave us a mind to reason with, didn't he? Let's go on. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. Have you ever thought about, I want you to look onto a map one of these days, a world map, and I want you to look how that the land is really a big jigsaw puzzle, that if you push the continents together, roughly speaking, you could make one land. I believe that was in the science magazine, it's called the Pangea, that there was one landmass and one ocean. Now think about that for a moment, because you can put your hand on the United States, for instance, and you can turn the globe exactly opposite. And opposite each and every landmass, there is a huge ocean basin. United States, turn it around, you're looking at the Indian Ocean. And you can do it with any of the continents, that opposite each and every landmass, there is a deep ocean basin. But the point is that it may have been that there was just one dry land. That's what the scriptures say. Let the waters under heaven be gathered together in one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. And through the tectonic processes in which there is great upheavals in the crust of the earth, then the continents were separated. But if you look at a map, a world map, you could fit them back together easily with a little imagination. But let's go on. God called the dry land earth. The gathering together of waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. He didn't make any mistakes about it, did he? Now look at this. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind. Isn't that a marvelous invention? There was none here before God made them. I think of a beautiful ripe peach or an apple or a plum or any fruit, that within that peach, within that fruit of any kind, there's a seed whose seed is within itself. And of course today, in the advancement in horticulture, we find that the different varieties of fruit, that they have been moved, they have been yielded in order to provide the best and the most beautiful fruit. Isn't that something? Whose seed is in itself. In other words, God's not going to have to go out there and create again and again the fruit on a tree, because the fruit is in itself. And he said, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. In other words, he has put plants here on the earth that can reproduce themselves. What a feat. What a wonderful miracle that God did for us there. Let's continue. Then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, for days and years. What are we talking about? We're talking about our own solar system here. Is it not that we look to the sun to measure our days, and that our orbit around the sun to measure our years? And for signs, you know, in the springtime, we come to that point of the equinox, in which these direct rays of the sun are shining directly on the equator. That changes the seasons. Let them be for signs and for seasons. At present time, we are coming out from under the winter, and we're headed toward that moment that we can say that spring has arrived. God Almighty fixed it that way. It was no accident. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens, to give light on the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights. The greater light to rule the day. Now what would that be except the sun? And the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. Look at that statement. He made two great lights. Of course, we know by understanding how we spin on our axis, the earth, that we have day and night. We have 24-hour periods. So this is what I'm saying, that the clock by which we measure 24 hours wasn't put in place until the fourth day. I'll let you think about what that does to the theory that each of these days was 24 hours long. But I don't want to argue about it. He said he gave that to rule over the earth and to rule over day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God said that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Let's go and continue here about this marvelous story. And God said, let the waters abound with abundance of living creatures. You know, scientists agree that life as we know it began in the sea. And let birds fly above the earth, across the firmament of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to his kind. God saw that it was good. You know, he's really good at this. And the Lord blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, and let birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Now comes that time in which the world explodes. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beasts of the earth, each according to his kind. And it was so. You know, Noah named them. So Noah was not some slobbering Neanderthal that was dragging a club around to beat his wife over the head. He was very intelligent because he named all of these animals. Another thing, and God made the beasts of the earth according to his kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeped on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And here comes a crowning moment. God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, according to our likeness. Let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creature, creeping thing that creeps on the earth. In other words, this is a superior animal in God's own image. And this is where man comes. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female. He created them to be able to reproduce. And so the marvelous story of the beginning. Well, let's study all about that in just for a moment. What is the Big Bang Theory? You know, you hear a lot about this. The Big Bang is how astronomers explain the way the universe began. We've just seen how it began. It is the idea that the universe began as just a single point, tiny little point, expanded and stretched to grow as large as it is right now, and is still stretching. Someone said, I don't understand that. If you take a balloon and while it is deflated, to put marks on it, take a pen and put marks on it, and then begin to blow that up, you'll see that your marks expand and pull away from each other. That's the idea of the Big Bang Theory, that the universe is still expanding. But let's study this. 1927, an astronomer by the name of Horace Lemaitre had a big idea. It was a big one. He said there was a long time ago the universe started as just a single point. He said the universe stretched and expanded to get as big as it is now, and that it could keep on stretching. That's the idea of the Big Bang theory, that somewhere there was that primordial element, boom, that started it all. Something to think about there, isn't it? But anyhow, what is the Big Bang? Well, 2 years later, an astronomer named Edwin Hubble, you've heard of that, haven't you? Hubble, the Hubble telescope, noticed that other galaxies were moving away from us. And that's not all. The farthest galaxies were moving faster than the ones close to us. How do we know? How can we tell that a galaxy is moving away from us? It has to do with the light spectrum. It seems that when you're looking at something in space, a light, and that when you filter that light into the different colors, the visible light, that if that object is moving away from you, it tends to slide toward the red. If it's moving towards you, it slides toward the blue. According to the theory, when the universe began, it was just hot and tiny particles mixed with light and energy. It was nothing like what we see now. As everything expanded and took up more space, it cooled down. It's not altogether cool yet. But that's the Big Bang theory. That at one time there was this one primordial unit at one primordial point and exploded. Well, that has ramifications. What does the Big Bang theory reveal? Something that you and I already know, that science admits there was a beginning. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Everything had a beginning. Everything, even our universe, in its vastness, that staggers the mind to try to even think about it, it had a beginning. What do you think about that? That science is admitting that there was a beginning. What is the first three words of the Bible? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If someone has nothing, picture your hand. Within that hand, you have nothing. I mean, nothing. He can never produce something. Somebody said, well, that's not hard to understand. Something never comes from nothing. And so our universe, as we think about it, there was never a moment that there wasn't something. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So if there was nothing, nothing would ever happen. Nothing would ever come of it, would it? Just think about that. If the universe came from a primordial something of hot, tiny particles mixed with light and energy, where did that come from? Where did those tiny, hot particles and light, where did that come from? It had to be created, didn't it? It had to be made. And it gets us back to what we all believe that read the scriptures, that God created the heavens and the earth. And we might look at the edge of it and think that we know something about it. But it is God who made it. And I think that is wonderful that the Big Bang theory reveals that scientists all over the world, everywhere, admit that there was a beginning. And of course, Bible readers have known that for a long time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I want you to think about that and think about the idea of the beginning of the universe. You know, there was such a thing as the beginning of the scriptures, that they were given to mankind that he might understand what to do in order to be saved, that he might understand the beginning, that he might understand what it is. You know, I know where I came from. God designed me. He designed me. He designed mankind. There's no such thing as the absence of God in the great story of the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, where'd God come from? I don't want to strain my brain thinking about that because it's too wonderful for me. It's too big to think about where did God come from. The all-powerful being that was able to speak worlds into existence. And you know, one of the great things that he began was his plan of redemption for mankind. All of us know the story that man failed, that he fell in the garden, that he failed to follow God's plan for him, and therefore he was cast out of the garden. And there's something that intervened upon him, and that was death. Death came upon all people. All human beings are going to die. But it was not so in the beginning. In the beginning, God had created the heavens and the earth, and everything was reproducing. Everything was constant. But now we have death. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And for our youngsters everywhere, I want you to think about that. Time is gone. This is Earl Barnett saying, have a good day.
Our God is an awesome God.
You have been watching Seeking the Lost with Earl Barnett. If you need prayer or have comments or questions, feel free to call the Seeking the Lost Ministry at 1-800-390-7734. That's toll free, 1-800-390-7734. Seeking the Lost is sponsored each week by some area churches of Christ. Until next time, may